Welcome back to Kubernetes Crashcasts. I'm Sheila, and I'm here with Victor to wrap up our chapter on setting up your environment. Before we dive in, I'd like to remind our listeners that if you're enjoying our podcast, please rate us on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more people who want to learn about Kubernetes. Now, let's kick things off with a quiz question. What kubectl command would you use to view all pods across all namespaces in your cluster?
That's an excellent question, Sheila. It's a command that many Kubernetes administrators use frequently. Without giving away the answer, I can say that it involves combining a few key concepts we've discussed: the kubectl command itself, the resource type we're looking for, and the idea of namespaces. Listeners, take a moment to think about it, and we'll reveal the answer at the end of the episode.
Great setup, Victor. Now, let's dive into our chapter summary. We've covered a lot of ground in setting up our Kubernetes environment. Can you give us a quick recap of the key points we've discussed about installing Kubernetes locally?
Absolutely, Sheila. We explored several options for setting up a local Kubernetes environment, including Minikube, Kind, Kubernetes in Docker, and Docker Desktop with Kubernetes enabled. Each of these tools allows developers to run a lightweight Kubernetes cluster on their local machine, which is perfect for learning and development purposes. The main advantage is that you can experiment with Kubernetes features without needing access to a full-scale cluster.
That's right, and I remember we mentioned that Minikube is particularly popular for beginners. Victor, could you remind our listeners why that is?
Certainly. Minikube is favored by beginners because it's relatively easy to set up and provides a full Kubernetes environment with just a single command. It also includes helpful add-ons like the Kubernetes Dashboard, which we'll talk about in a moment. However, it's worth noting that more advanced users might prefer Kind or Docker Desktop for their specific features or integration with existing Docker setups.
Speaking of commands, we spent quite a bit of time discussing kubectl. Can you summarize the basics of kubectl for our listeners?
Of course, kubectl is the command line interface for interacting with Kubernetes clusters. It's the primary tool for deploying applications, managing cluster resources, and viewing logs. Some essential kubectl commands we covered include kubectl get for listing resources, kubectl describe for detailed information about a resource, and kubectl apply for creating or updating resources from a file. We also discussed how kubectl uses a configuration file, typically located at jar kube chart config, to know which cluster to connect to and with what credentials.
That's a great summary, Victor. I remember when I first started using kubectl, I found it a bit overwhelming. Do you have any tips for newcomers to make the learning process easier?
Absolutely, Sheila. One tip I always give is to use kubectl explain command. For example, kubectl explain pods will give you a detailed explanation of the pod resource. Another useful trick is to use kubectl get pods, O-wide, to get more detailed information about your pods in a single command. And don't forget about tab completion. It can save you a lot of time and help you discover new commands.
Those are great tips, Victor. Now, let's talk about the Kubernetes Dashboard. We explored this tool in our chapter. Can you remind our listeners what it is and why it's useful?
Certainly. The Kubernetes Dashboard is a web-based user interface for Kubernetes clusters. It provides an alternative to the command line interface, allowing users to deploy containerized applications, troubleshoot them, and manage cluster resources through a more visual medium. It's particularly useful for those who prefer a graphical interface or for quickly getting an overview of the cluster's state.
I remember when I first used the dashboard, I was impressed by how much information it provided at a glance. But Victor, we also discussed some security considerations with the dashboard, didn't we?
That's right, Sheila. While the dashboard is a powerful tool, it's important to be cautious about its use, especially in production environments. By default, the dashboard has very broad permissions, which could be a security risk if accessed by unauthorized users. We recommended using role-based access control, RBAC, to limit dashboard permissions and always accessing it through secure means, like kubectl proxy.
Those are crucial points to remember. Now, as we wrap up this chapter, what would you say are the main challenges people face when setting up their Kubernetes environment?
Great question, Sheila. One common challenge is dealing with networking issues, especially when setting up a multi-node cluster. Another frequent stumbling block is understanding the different components of Kubernetes and how they interact. Additionally, managing dependencies and versions can be tricky, as Kubernetes and its related tools are constantly evolving.
Those challenges certainly resonate with my experience. Do you have any final best practices or tips for our listeners as they set up their environments?
Absolutely. First, always keep your Kubernetes version up to date, but be aware of potential breaking changes. Second, use version control for your Kubernetes configurations. It can save you a lot of headaches. Third, start with a simple setup and gradually add complexity as you become more comfortable. And finally, don't be afraid to break things in your local environment. That's often how we learn the most.
That's excellent advice, Victor. Now, before we wrap up, let's reveal the answer to our quiz question. The command to view all pods across all namespaces is kubectl get pods, all namespaces. This command combines the get pods operation with the Arch all namespaces flag to show pods from every namespace in the cluster.
Great explanation, Sheila. And remember, listeners, understanding these commands comes with practice. Don't worry if it seems overwhelming at first. We've all been there.
Absolutely, Victor. To summarize today's episode, we've recapped the key points of setting up a Kubernetes environment, including local installation options, kubectl basics, and the Kubernetes Dashboard. We've also discussed common challenges and best practices. Remember, the journey to mastering Kubernetes is a marathon, not a sprint. Keep practicing, and you'll get there. And before we sign off, we'd love to hear from you. Visit crashcasts.com, join our Discord community, or support us on Patreon. Your engagement helps us create better content for you. Until next time, happy clustering.